and officially welcome each of you to Self-Care for Awareness and Ease. And this class was really born out of my desire to continue to help bring resources and support for people to be able to utilize to help create space and time for us to drop into our own body and our own body's ability to respond. I think that's the key that I want to keep focusing on in our time together is, what does it feel like in my system? How is it in my system to be what my body wants, and what is comfortable and easy and allows my body to feel listened to. So my disclaimer for today and all of our time together is that you take care of yourself. So we'll talk along as we go along about modifications and things that may be helpful for you. But the main thing is that you're listening to what is best for your own body and listening to where you may need to find some support so that your body can feel heard and met. So we're working a lot today with the difference or the relationship between stability and mobility. And we'll talk more about that as we go along today, but some of us need a little bit more stability in our low back and our pelvis, and some of us need a little bit more fluidity. And sometimes it's a combination of the two and how that relationship connects to the rest of the body. So even though we're taking just a little bit of a snippet today for looking at the low back and the pelvis, of course, we're including the whole body. So keeping the whole body in mind, even as we do some exercises that are a little bit more contained around the pelvis. So without further ado, I'd love to just start class with a little bit of assessment of where we are now. I always like to do a little assessment at the front end, and then we'll do some exercises throughout class and then a reassessment on the other end, and notice if any of these exercises or awarenesses have changed your perception or your sensations of what you're feeling in your own body. So let's start with a little bit of recognition of where we are today. If you have, if you'd like to be sitting, if you have a flatter surface to sit on or something, if you're on the floor, a little blanket or something underneath those sits bones, those pelvic bones, you can sit on the floor. I'm sitting on a little stool here, comfortable little stool. So that might be helpful, but you want to have something where you really can feel the feet of your pelvis there, that foundation. And you might just start by kind of rocking side to side to notice that connection, maybe a little forward and back, just to feel where you are to begin with. And then we're going to start with just a moment of finding ourselves in relationship to gravity and relationship to space. So I invite you to keep your eyes open or close them depending on where you want to be right now. So sometimes it feels safer for us to keep our eyes open while paying a little bit of attention to our body. And for others of us, it helps if we close our eyes and let go of our external environment so that we can tune in to that internal landscape. So I invite you to find your comfort with your visual receptive organ there.
Jessica, before you get going too far, I can just see you from the waist up, and I don't know if that's what you want, but that's all I can see.
That's all we want for now, Karen. Thanks for letting us know. So I invite you to drop in and simply notice your pelvis. What might you notice about your pelvis? Maybe you notice the structure of it, the container. Can you notice your breath in relationship to your pelvis or your low back? Can you feel how, as you breathe in, to the lungs? Is there also a movement of expansion in the pelvis and or the back? And as you exhale and release the air out of your body, can you also notice the condensing of the area around your pelvis and low back? And maybe you're noticing any areas of discomfort or maybe even pain. And if you feel like those areas are coming more to the surface, notice if there's another position or some other awareness that you might bring to the forefront to be able to bring the relationship of discomfort in connection with a different part of your body, a different space in your body, a different awareness of your body. And as you notice your pelvis and your low back, especially today, you may notice other parts of your body as well, but can you also notice how gravity moves through your body in this moment and brings you into connection with the earth? Can you feel the magnetism of the earth center pulling you towards it? Can you feel the earth rising up to meet your pelvis? Is there a meeting place there? And then the opposite, notice if that's comfortable or not comfortable for you. And then the opposite is, can we find some awareness with the space around us? So maybe your attention is with your pelvis, your low back, your spine, and notice what it may feel like to gravitate towards space or the energy around you. What do you notice in your system as you bring that into your awareness? Is it comfortable or uncomfortable? And is there a happy meeting place in the middle there between that pull of gravity grounding you to your deepest support versus that pull or expansion to our other support, which is the space around us? So we're already moving into this awareness of stability versus expansion or mobility space. I'm going to keep that as a theme today. As you notice what you notice about your own body right now, allowing it to have a moment to become present to what is. And as we continue, you can slowly open your eyes if they're closed. We're going to do just a very gentle little tapping on your back. So we're going to have a really soft fist. So I'm not doing any kind of forcing of my back, and take a little bit of a tapping move on your kidney area, your low back. We're just taking a moment to wake it up a little bit. You can come into your glutes. Maybe it feels better to come right to your sacrum, which is that triangular bone at the base of your spine. Maybe it feels better coming a little higher up. And as you're tapping, simply notice your breathing a bit. Are you able to breathe with effortlessness through your nose? And then maybe we bring our fingertips to the front of the belly and remember those organs in the front, and notice the tapping, waking up that enteric nervous system a bit, bringing some awareness there. And then maybe do a little tapping out to the sides of the legs and down towards the knee. top of the legs. You'd rather do a fist, or maybe that tapping is too much stimulation for you. Maybe you'd like a little brushing instead. So notice kind of what your body wants for this moment. I'm moving down, up and down kind of the fronts and the insides of the legs, sides of the legs, even the hamstrings in the back. And then you can take a little bit of tapping down the lower leg and the foot. Nice and gentle. Other side. And then pause again and take a moment to notice what you feel. So we're going to move from there into, and again, you can do this in a seated position. It's great if you could do it in a chair where your knees are just a little bit lower than your hips, but it also works on the floor if you sit on a little bit of a towel or a mat. So you could roll up your bath towel a little bit, or a blanket. So you have a little bit of lift of your pelvis. And we're going to start with some simple little pelvic rocks. So you could put your hands on your belly in front and your sacrum in the back. You could put your hands on either side of your hips, your hip bones. So wherever feels comfortable, you can also just let your arms relax. And we're going to take a little rock back behind those sits bones and a gentle rock forward. So if this movement at all feels like irritating, or it feels any kind of discomfort, think about making it smaller and smaller and smaller. And it may be so small that you have to simply imagine the movement. So noticing what we're doing is finding a little bit of this mobility. So the lower back is really meant a lot more for stability, but we also need to keep it in relationship to its ability to expand and move and find breath. So as you move back and forth, notice where in that relationship of that rocking you feel the most comfortable. Where is that? Could be right on top of your sits bones. It could be rocking forward to the front edge of your sits bones. So wherever that is, I want you to pause there and take your hands to the sides of your pelvis on either side, and take a gentle squeeze of your hands towards each other. Again, if this doesn't feel good, then you're going to just pause where you are. And notice if there's a reflex in your body, and your body says, I'm ready to come out of that. And as you feel that response coming, listen, release your hands, and come back into that rocking back and forth. So we did a little bit, those of you who are studying or are orthobiology practitioners, you may notice that as a little phase 4 compression, going into our comfort, pausing or giving the body just a little bit of compression there, and then listening for a response. You may notice that I feel like I've turned a little bit more into this figure 8 movement now. So I'm really feeling more dimensionality coming into this movement, and my back is starting to get a little bit more space in it. Had some discomfort this morning, and I'm feeling a little bit more mobility now already. So you can pause there and just notice that. If you do that movement again, you might notice what is it like to move from your structure. So for me, when I move from my structure today, it feels a little bit rigid. It feels like I'm kind of a little bit robotic. And so for me, I feel like I need a little, I have my spine is a little bit compressed, and I feel like I need a little bit more space in it. So what I'm going to practice is thinking about moving from my organs. So as I do that movement, instead of initiating from my structure. I'm going to initiate from allowing the contents of my lower belly to move forward, and then allowing those contents to gently sink towards the back of my body. Almost like, you know, in the bathtub, if you had a bathtub full of little rubber duckies and you kind of gently push the rubber duckies to one end and then they would slowly whoosh, come back to the other end. It's a little bit how it feels, or a big bowl of Jell-O. So I'm moving in a very different way, and you want to find your own timing with this movement to begin to notice how it feels in your body. It might feel that the organs don't feel very mobile, and you're not connecting in with that. So what might it feel like to feel the energy around your pelvis and move from there? Almost as if space is supporting you and space is initiating the movement for this gentle rocking back and forth. And you might feel like, oh, Jessica, I'm really tired of moving back and forth. This is kind of, I feel like I want to explore other options. I love it. If you do, maybe you come into a little side to side movement, or figure 8 side to side movement, or maybe you just forget all of the directions and simply move where your pelvis wants to go. So if you want the freedom to be able to do that, listen to your own body. And again, using some of our orthobionomy principles, you might find that in that movement, oh, there's a little bit of stickiness there. We're not going to go through that stickiness. We're not going to force through the body, force the movement through there. We're going to find places that are easy. So I'm finding this position a little bit of side bending. That feels really happy on my body. So I might pause there for a moment and listen if a movement comes in that's a little different and allows me to move in a new way, potentially, or in a new direction. So as you explore these ways to move in those figure 8s and those forward and backward movement, pelvic rocking with your body, remember that we're not trying to force any movement, because when we go into force, we really do override the nervous system. And when we override the nervous system, we're not allowing our body the space to practice those reflexive, self-correcting, healing properties that we innately have in our body. So listening for when we kind of want to like, oh, I just want to do this movement, versus let me back up a minute and pause and see if there may be another way to move about this in order to continue to create space for new perceptions, new awarenesses, new sensations to maybe come in. Okay, so just checking out as we continue on how you're feeling with all that. So I'm going to come into standing if you want to join me, and we're going to move into a little bit of the same idea, but now we're going to come into a little bit more of a figure 8. So in our figure 8 here, I want you to think about the pubic bone in the front of your pelvis and the tailbone in the back, and then the 2 sits bones, which we were just on, making that diamond shape. And as the focus here, thinking about the middle of that diamond shape, the perineum, and thinking about that middle of your pelvis initiating this very gentle figure 8. So it's almost as if I'm drawing a figure 8 on the floor between my 2 feet. And you might not like to go that way. You might like to go more, I want to do a figure 8 front to back, Jessica. That's good too, right? But notice how effortless this movement can be, right? So if I was doing it in a different way, I could go like this, right? And that might be a little bit more of a way to kind of move my, move from my musculature, right? Move from my structure. But this figure eight is really moving from deep within and noticing the response of the low back and the pelvis from that gentle figure eight movement. Some of you may feel like, oh, my figure eight to the right is really big and my figure eight to the left is just really tiny. That's okay. Listening to that space that your body feels, again, the most ease. And it might be that that continues to change. It might be that you exaggerate the place that feels really comfortable. Right? So I'm kind of exaggerating to my right. It feels really nice and fluid through there. And as I exaggerate a few times, I realize that this left side is changing. And now I have a different awareness of that figure eight side to side. So I have a much different relationship left and right. And then what does it feel like to reverse it? In this figure eight, you also might feel like, it's so yummy right in here. Oh, it's like, oh, that feels really yummy. What might it feel like to hang out there for a minute and allow your nervous system to really feel that connection? And then notice when you can reflexively move out of it and pause and allow the body to just naturally, spontaneously come out of that movement. And you might feel like the other parts of your body want to get involved in this figure eight. That's great. So maybe your arms want to get involved. Maybe even want your legs to get involved. What does it feel like from your perception? Where do you feel that initiation from your lower back, your pelvis, in the most effortless way in order to spark movement in any other part of your body? So now we're going to move from that figure eight to just a real simple movement of a little bit of a bend of your knee. So this one is just my toes are pointed out to the side. I'm in kind of an external rotation standing, and my heels are a little bit wider than my hips. And we're going to also feel that same kind of diamond center place that we're going to initiate from. But this time, actually, let's change it. First, let's just do a regular bend of your knees, just like you would be doing a regular kind of squat. You're squatting down to bend down, maybe to get something. So it's, a lot of times this, keep going while I talk, a lot of times this is where back pain or back injuries happen, is because we squat with this really rounded position in our low backs. And with this rounded position, it places a lot of pressure on those discs posteriorly, which then the disc comes out and it can cause a lot of pain. So a lot of our pain happens because we don't think about our pelvis as differentiated from the legs. So we want to really use our pelvis as part of our spine, as opposed to the pelvis as part of the legs. So again, a lot of back pain can happen if those hamstrings are tight, if our ankles are tight, can go all the way down. But we really want to think about this neutral pelvis, or this way that our front of our hips can be soft as we bend our knees. So as you're doing those squats, I hope you're feeling the leg muscles now, right? We're going to try it a different way. So shake that out and think about, again, the diamond shape, widening and opening, beginning from there. So it's almost as if your spine kind of lowers in between the pelvis, the sides of the pelvis, and then begins to come back up, almost like a little elevator. But it happens because those sits bones widen and allow the knees to bend. So in this exercise, I'm feeling a lot less work through my quadriceps, and I'm feeling a lot more. What I'm doing right now is I'm really building stability in the lower back and in the pelvis. It's just a simple little bend of the knees, but we're feeling that nice wrapping through the waist. If we gently engage that lower belly lifting up as the pelvis opens. Notice how that might feel in your lower back. And then again, you might get curious of what does it feel like while you're in that little squat, and you could do a little mini squat is good, to do a little pelvic movement. So I'll turn aside so you can see me, but maybe in that little squat, you do a little forward and backward rocking of your pelvis, just like we did on the stool. Maybe you do a little side to side. Or maybe you get really fancy and do your figure eights here. One way and then the other. And you stay with your curiosity of exploration. Again, if you feel a tension building or if you feel a tightness in your lower back, come back to that standing place and gentle figure eights. Or if that causes any pain, just thinking about those figure eights. Because we really want to stay with coming out of any kind of pain patterns. We're trying to change our patterns here. And sometimes that requires us to create a little bit more space so that our brains can feel and see and do it differently. How do we stay curious for those new awarenesses to come in? Okay, so from here, I'd like to do a little bit of a hamstring stretch. So what I just talked about was a lot of times our glute muscles are not able to work so well because we've got this little posterior tuck, or maybe that they're so tight that they're not able to we're not able to fully extend the leg as we're walking. And so because of that, it causes a lot of back pain. And of course, then a lot of us can be sitting at a computer. We have a lot more computer things that we do now, which creates this kind of condensing of the psoas and doesn't allow for the freedom of this thigh, of this femur in the hip socket. I'm just going to show you real quick on Mr. Bones what that looks like. So here's our pelvis that we've been working with, right? These are the ilium coming down here all the way to the front where the pubic bone is, and there's a pubic symphysis between there. This right here is the sacroiliac joint. This is the front of the SI joint. And if I turn Mr. Bones around, you're going to see the back. This is where a lot of pain can happen for people in these SI joints. And here is your sacrum. So the sacrum is simply the extension up and supports the spine. So much mediation between the two sides of the pelvis happen right here in this SI joint. And it should also happen in the pubic bone in the front, but sometimes that is overlooked. So we want this rotation to happen. We want there to be movement in the pelvis. But when the pelvis acts as part of the leg, this whole thing gets kind of feeling like it's one piece, as opposed to this femur. We're going to do a lot of these things next, and we practice this in these little bends of the knees that we did. The femur really moving around the hip joint, and I'm doing it mostly to the front, but we also want it to move to the back. So we get that full range of movement in the joint. And when we have this movement, then the back doesn't have to do the movement here because we've got it at the hip joint. Okay, so from here, we're going to practice. We're going to do a quick little dynamic hamstring stretch. So you could do this with just your foot flexed in front of you. Here. You could also do it if you have a little stool or maybe your sofa or a chair to put your leg on. So simply starting with that leg up on your stool. And again, if it's too high, you may notice that your pelvis kind of tucks. And we really want to try to do the opposite of that. We want to feel that sits bone reaching down to the floor, or even slightly reaching back behind you. So if your pelvis feels it like it's too tucked in, make sure you lower the leg so that you can really feel that anterior rotation of the pelvis reaching long and elongating the hamstring there. So let's just start with a little ankle movement, flexing and pointing the ankle. And you might even feel as you flex the foot, what happens if you internally or externally rotate the foot from the hip. That's kind of turning the toes in, turning the toes out, but you're trying to move the whole leg. And you'll notice that you're stretching different parts of the hamstring in the back. There's a few different layers of those hamstrings or parts of those hamstrings. So find where you feel the most comfort or the most ease in that flex position, or maybe you want to feel where you feel the most stretch. And then gently reach that sits bone back as you lengthen the heel forward. And you might even add a slight little bend of the torso forward, and then gently come out of that. So we're using the breath to elongate, reaching the heel in one direction, the sits bone in the other, a gentle forward fold, and gently come out of that. And let's just do that once more. Finding the edge of the stretch, we're not forcing or pushing through it, and then gently coming out of that. And then very quickly, let's do the other side. Actually, just shake out that leg and notice the difference between your two sides for a moment, that little 30-second stretch. And then we'll do the other side. This is so simple, but it can be so effective for your health of your back and your pelvis. So here we are again, just starting with a little flexing and pointing of the foot. Your leg can be on a chair or stool. It can be on the floor with your body bent forward slightly. If it's too much, you can also bend that bottom leg, the standing leg. And as we have you with your foot flexed, feel that elongation of the sits bone gently reaching either down to the floor or down and back. You should feel that hamstring stretch. I can feel it without even leaning forward there. And then gently coming forward. Now, some of you, and then kind of do what we did before, a little bit of exhale, folding over the leg, inhale, coming out of it. Some of you may have hamstrings that are just ridiculously loose, and you don't feel anything in this stretch at all. So for you, I might recommend pressing down into your heel, into the stool. So a little bit of isometric pushing down. So you're getting a little bit more of an awareness of that hamstring. And then you can follow through with simply letting your leg release off of the chair, the stool, and coming back behind you. So hopefully you've done a few little hamstring breaths here. It's great to find a different angle of your foot so you're getting different parts of the hamstring. And I really like the kind of stretching where we're gonna come in and out of it gently. So we're gonna keep the fluidity, because otherwise it's just a stagnant hold. We're not really getting anywhere with that. Okay, so we did our lovely little hamstring stretch. Hopefully that feels good side to side. Ah, it does feel good. And then I want you to come, if you can, down to the floor. And I'm going to go ahead and set up, if you do have a towel or a scarf, you may want it underneath you. I've kind of folded mine long ways in thirds, and I'm going to place it under my lower back, kind of around my waist a little bit, actually. So, yeah, you can see, good. Okay, so this is a fabulous exercise. I'm not getting into so heavy. Again, my eyes are always bigger than my stomach. And I want to give you about 17 hours of things when I really have 1 hour. So this is just a little snippet for today. And one of the things that we could go into, have many classes on, is that psoas. And the psoas is a muscle that attaches from your lower back, and it comes through the pelvis and attaches to the front of your inner thigh. And that psoas muscle is such a deep muscle. It's also really used as a neuroendocrine organ. And so it's so crucial for the information coming up from our feet through our through our torso and up into the central nervous system to give us all kinds of feedback. When we sit a lot, that thing is short, dehydrated, and taut. So this is a great exercise to help elongate that psoas. A lot of times I feel like stretching the psoas is not really helpful for the long run. So we want to work it in different ways to help it understand that it has its ability to flex and extend, right? To be mobile, to be fluid. So on your back here, we're going to start and actually just take a little assessment by doing a little bit of a knee fold in. So you're going to bend one knee into your chest and give it a little bit of a stir in the socket, and you might go both ways. I have my opposite foot down on the ground with the knee bent, kind of in line with the pelvis. And then from here, I'm going to take that, I'm starting with my right leg here. I'm going to take my leg in tabletop, and I'm going to bring my knee right over my hip. And then I'm going to use my either one or two hands on the top of the knee. And we're going to do an isometric, meaning we're going to bring the knee towards the chin or the chest with about 10% of your actual force. So it's a tiny little push, and you're going to gently pull that knee towards your chest while pushing on your knee. So you're not letting it move. You're doing that isometric contraction here. And after you count to 10, you're going to slowly release that leg and bring it towards your chest. And notice if you can fold it in as far as it's comfortable, trying to relax the front of your hip. We're going to do that same thing 2 more times, but instead of starting with the knee right over the hip, we're going to bring it 2 inches closer to start. So here we go, the same thing. We're going to gently bring the knee towards the hand. The hand is resisting the knee coming in. And you may feel some tiny little muscles in your lower back fire up. Those are called your multifidi muscles. Good, release the knee, pull it into your chest. See if you may relax a little bit of your shoulders or your neck here. And then the same thing one last time, except we're going to come 2 inches closer in from that second time. So each time we're coming just slightly closer into your chest. Last time, gentle pull in of the knee. You're breathing nice and easily through your nose, in and out. And then release that knee towards your chest. And then if you'd like, you can extend the leg you just worked all the way down towards the ground. And notice that release. You may kind of take your leg side to side, give it a little shake side to side. And then extend the opposite leg and see if you notice the difference between your two sides. I notice that my right leg kind of flops out a little bit more. So this is it's trying to help the psoas elongate, but it's also re-educating our multifidi to be used as stabilizers instead of using the psoas so much as a stabilizer. We really want the psoas to be utilized in that mobility, that flexion and extension. So now let's do the opposite leg. Coming up, taking your other leg, starting at that 90 degrees with your leg in tabletop, hands on your knee, shoulders are nice and gentle, your jaw is relaxed. Very gently using about 10% of your force, bring the knee towards the chest, and you're going to resist with your hands. I'm going to count to about 8 or 10, and then allow that knee to gently move in towards your chest. Good. Same thing again, starting in about 2 inches. Gently pull the knee towards your chest. Should feel a little bit of activity in the low back, maybe around the sacrum as well. And gently release the knee towards your chest. And then last time, 2 inches a little closer to begin with. Again, if this feels not comfortable at all, you can still do the same thing starting from the comfortable position. And release that knee towards your chest. Good, and then slowly extend both legs to the floor. And maybe, hopefully you notice there's just a little bit more opening in the front of the hip, a little more space through the front of the hip. You might give your legs a little gentle rock side to side. Now we can do that same thing in the medial or lateral direction and also a little bit in the twisting. So I'm going to show you a couple of versions and you can follow along with whatever feels comfortable for you. But you might take one leg up and hold beside the leg, hold that lateral side of the knee. And now I'm going to push my knee into my hand this way. So my left leg is pressing to my left. I'm going to do the same thing, a small amount of force for about 8 to 10 seconds. And then I'm gently going to follow through in the direction I was pushing. So I'm going to do one to my outside, and then I'm going to do one towards the inside. So I'm going to press the inside of the knee into my hand, and I'm going medially this time towards my midline. And then I'm gently releasing that knee across the body, just slightly. And then we might try the same on the other side, that lateral push from the opposite knee. So I'm keeping the other hip bone on the floor. So this is, again, it's a tiny push and gently opening to the side. And then I'm going to use my opposite hand. So I have my left hand on the inside of my right knee now. And I'm going to push that right knee medially, keeping it there. Little activation of the inner thigh muscles and gently letting that leg come across the body. Good. And so again, we're slowly releasing some of the muscles deep around that femur head, the top of the thigh bone, to be able to move easily within the hip socket. Now, if you have any back pain, please do not do this one or be mindful, but you want to take both knees over to one side and take a nice little twist of your upper body to the opposite side. So I'm kind of looking to my left as my knees are dropped to my right. And let's take a gentle movement of your arm as if you're going to draw a big circle around your body with that arm, circling all the way to the front, over the top of the thigh. And again, if you were taking longer here, you might do 3 or 4 directions, 3 or 4 circles in one direction, and then you might reverse in the opposite direction. So what I'm doing is I'm not trying to twist so much my lower back, but I'm trying to twist a little bit through my thoracic spine in order to remind my thoracic spine that it has a lot more rotational ability than my lumbar spine does. So from here, with that little bit of break, we're going to do a little isometric here. I'm placing my right hand on top of my left outer knee. If you're opposite, you would be placing your left hand on top of your right outer knee. And I'm gently pushing that left knee now against my hand. And you can turn your head away from your legs or towards it, whatever feels comfortable. I'm doing that same thing for about 10 seconds. And then I'm gently going to follow through, bringing one knee up, bringing the other knee up, and letting them pass through the middle to the other side. And then gently coming back to neutral or back to that beginning position, right? So you may want to take a little bit of an assessment here, noticing what you notice. And then we'll repeat the other thing, the same thing on the other side. So gently take your knees to the opposite side. Mine are going both to the left. And drawing that nice big circle around your body. Again, if you feel any pain here, then simply don't twist quite as much, right? So that your twisting will be, might just be your shoulder is coming over, or it might be that your arm is over your head and you're just looking with your head to the opposite side, but your whole shoulder and arm are not coming all the way to the floor. So listen to your own body, drawing those big circles around. Noticing if you're still breathing, that would be awesome. So once you've done a couple circles in both sides, then we'll do the isometric, placing your top hand on your top knee and gently pushing the knee against the hand. Notice if you can feel, just like we did in that hamstring stretch, if you can feel your sits bones kind of reach away from your body as you're doing this. And gently follow through, bringing the other knee with it and following all the way through to the other side. So we want to give the nervous system, we want to let the nervous system go where it wanted to push and follow that through. And then we can come back to neutral and kind of recheck. So do a little kind of figure 8 here, right? Sometimes I talk about supine walking, and that's a little bit where your knees and your feet are in line with your hips, and one knee is reaching forward as the opposite hip rocks back. So this is a great way to, it's a great retraining or re-education for what the pelvis and the low back do as we walk. It's kind of taking gravity out of it a little bit and bringing it into a new relationship here. So this is a really wonderful way to re-educate. And notice, you may notice as you're doing this, as one knee comes forward, one side really can roll back and the other side not quite so much. And that has to do with a little bit of misunderstanding or let's see, a better word might be one side of your pelvis is in one pattern that the other side has compensated for, or vice versa. And we want to feel if we can find that fluidity through the midline, side to side. Good. So from here, let's take our towel around your, if you have it, of course you don't have to have one, if it's around your waist, and gently take it and cross it over the midline so that after it's crossed, you can hold the edges of your towel and do a gentle little squeeze of pulling the towel in opposite directions. I think you can see me here. Yeah, good. And so those of us who might need some more support for the lower back, this is a wonderful thing to feel, this kind of cinching in of the waistline. Now, so many of us in Pilates, we've learned to do a lot of activation of that lower abdominal, that transversus abdominis, by pulling the navel towards the spine, which is a great thing to start to activate those lower abdominal muscles. However, if we stay there, we're really forcing the diaphragm up, we're forcing those lower organs up, we're creating a lot of disconnect between our upper and our lower torso. So for this, we want to remember to feel, can we still feel the activation of the abdominals, but keep the pelvis in what's called a little more neutral position. That means that your pubic bone is reaching slightly towards your legs. You may have a little bit of space underneath your lumbar spine. And then see if you can keep that with your structure while you gently pull the towel in opposite directions. So if you don't have a towel, you can just gently feel that wrapping and squeezing of your muscles, like you have a belt on your insides, and that belt is cinching in just a little bit more. So it doesn't necessarily mean that you lock and hold your abdominals here, right? We might do that as a movement to feel the abdominals, and then we also want to do a movement to let it go. So if that feels supportive of you, for you to keep that towel on, definitely keep it. But if not, you can let the towel go and simply press into your heels, press into your toes, and see if you can float your pelvis 1 inch up off of the floor. If that feels like it might cause strain on your lower back, you can just imagine it. Or you can simply press your feet into the floor and pretend to lift up. That will also activate those muscles. And then gently lower down. So here we're building stability. We're building more stability in those lower abdominals, in the pelvis. Let's try it again. Float the hips up off the floor. So remember here, I'm not doing a tuck to lift, but I'm keeping my pelvis just flat, just in that neutral position to float up. And then gently lower down. And let's do that one more time. Gently float up. Now there's all kinds of fancy things you could do here to increase your difficulty, right? You could lift and lower the heels. You could do a little bit of marching where one leg lifts up and the other. That is really telling for sure as you begin to develop core strength. It might be that you start with one heel lifting, right? And notice that. It might be you can come down and rest as I'm talking. I'm just giving you lots of different options here. It might be that as you do that neutral bridging, then you lower one hip down as you lift the other. So again, we're kind of we're challenging the stability by adding in a little bit of movement and weighting one side a little more than the other. So that could be a nice little rocking. If all of that feels like that's way too much, Jessica, I need a little bit of something else before I get there. You could take a couch cushion. I'm sorry, a couch pillow. That would be better than a cushion, like so. Between your knees, you could take a yoga block. Sometimes I like a yoga block because it has a little bit more feedback. Finding that neutral pelvis again. And before you lift, gently squeeze the block between your knees and float the pelvis gently off the floor. Again, this is like a little hovercraft over here, right? This doesn't have to be some big bridge. That's a different exercise, which is also good. But for developing deep stability in the back, a little squeeze of the block, a little gentle lift of the pelvis, and then slowly come down. So I've given you a bunch of options, and the goal here is really to figure out what works for you. So as you begin to try, sometimes it's like hard to know, is this going to work for me? I'm not quite sure. Sometimes I think about doing the exercise before I actually do it. And sometimes thinking about it helps to open up the energetic neural pathways first to see if it might be safe. And that's how we continue to support our proprioceptive system to know actually where safety is and what's going to be appropriate exercise or how much to push ourselves in a particular movement. Okay, I'm going to give you at least one more. I'm kind of moving along, but hopefully you will be able to pick out what you'd like and what you need from some of these self-care for the back and pelvis exercises. So now I'm coming onto my hands and knees, sorry. And my hands and knees here, again, if this feels like too much on your wrists, then another option would be to come down to your elbows and your knees. That could be a good position. You could also do this with your body a little bit leaning forward on a counter. But the main thing I want you to watch is that you come back to that neutral pelvis. So a lot of times we get here and we're a little bit rounded. So give yourselves a little puppy dog wag of the tail back here. So your sits bones are gently moving side to side. Again, going at your own pace. You may even do a little figure eight here, right? And get creative. This is what we're getting creative about. So first though, I just want you to do a little warm up by circling the whole torso over the shoulders and the pelvis. So I'm gently bringing my weight forward into my wrists, and then I'm circling my hips back over one hip, over the other hip, and coming through again, creating a big circle. This should feel really good on your hips, your pelvis, maybe even your shoulders, and then reverse that circle and take the opposite direction. Good. And then from here, this is another exercise for stabilizing the spine. So this is where we're getting a little bit more deep core work through the stability of our spine. A lot of you know this exercise is called bird dog, but the idea here is that as we're engaging the low belly, we're going to extend one leg back behind you. Just extend it with your toes on the floor. Keep thinking about your head reaching in one direction and your toes or your heel reaching in the opposite direction. And then see if you can float that leg up without changing anything from your hands and your knee on the ground. And now as the leg is in the air, see if you can knit that wide waistband of your strong abdominals up and in without changing the shape of your back and without lowering the leg. Now that leg might just be on the ground. That's okay too, or you can hover it just above the ground. And then slowly bring that leg back in without too much shifting side to side. Let's try the other side. Opposite leg goes back. Find the length first. Imagine someone's pulling the crown of your head in one direction and your toes in the other, and the space between each vertebra in your spine gets a little longer. And then notice if you can float that leg up. Yes, find those deep abdominal muscles. See if you can lengthen the leg a little bit further. And then slowly bring the knee back in. Now again, if you like a little bit more advanced version, you can do that opposite arm and leg, trying not to shift. You could take your arm and leg out to the sides together and then bring them back into midline. You could even bend one knee and reach the fingertips back toward your toes. All of this is deep, 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 deep core stabilizing muscles to help create a lot of safety and clarity in that lower back. Okay, I know our time is coming to an end. I want to show you one more fabulous one. This is one of my favorites. So I'm going to sit now with my legs about 90 degrees in front of me. And this might be too much on your hamstrings. If so, you're going to take that bath mat again, and you're going to fold it up, and you might sit on it. So you have a little bit more lift right here. And it's okay if you come off of it while we're moving here. Now what we're going to start with is bringing our weight actually back on our hands as if we're sort of lounging. And we're going to bend the left knee and bend the right knee as you twist slightly to your left. And then reach the heels. The heels are going to do the movement for me of reaching out and away. I'm shifting my weight now to my other side, to my right, as I bend my knees. So the movement is the heels reach away. I kind of roll on my glutes, through my pelvis, shift my weight into the other hand, and then let both knees bend on the other side. Heels reach away, my legs extend, twist to the other side as my knees bend. So you can keep up this pace. This is great. And the goal of this exercise, if you haven't figured it out already, is that we're moving the femur around in the hip socket in this internal rotation, and then slowly back open to the external rotation. If it's too much on your wrists, if it feels like too much as you go back, then you could do the same thing in a seated in a chair. It would just be a little bit smaller, right? So really getting that ooey gooey movement through the pelvis, through the femurs, opening up each of those joints. Good, and coming back to center. So I invite you to come back to a space in which you can create a little bit of a quieter moment to assess again. And you might want to do this standing. You might feel more comfortable sitting. Sometimes I like to sit on a little yoga block so that my hips are a little bit higher than my knees, and that allows a lot of release through the front of the quadriceps here and the hip flexors. So find that comfortable place again. Notice if your eyes want to be soft and the gaze down or the eyes closed, or notice if you prefer staying aware of your surroundings with your eyes open. Simply take a moment and reassess the conversation, the communication that you're having with your low back and your pelvis. And notice if anything has changed from the beginning of our time together today to the end. Coming back to our relationship with gravity and space. Recognizing that you have the choice in your body to come a little bit more into support, into gravity, into feeling a little more density or tone in your body, versus bringing your tone a little more diffuse and noticing your connection or your relationship to the space around you, and how both can be a support to our system. And when you're ready, come back to the space around you. My hope is that you can take some of these exercises and utilize them and build upon them to develop your own curiosities about how your back and your pelvis can move with more awareness and ease. Thank you all for being here. I'm definitely going to stay on for a couple minutes. If you have any other questions, specific questions, we will stop the recording. But if I don't see you after class, have a fabulous week. And I look forward to seeing you next week. I think next week is about the feet. So I'll enjoy seeing you then. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.